You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've got major news right now, and that is the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is currently meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell and her attorneys in federal prison. And so the question swirling around right now is that if the DOJ is meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell before Congress has the ability to speak with Ghislaine Maxwell, what do they have the ability to do if, for example, Maxwell might have information that compromises the President of the United States?
So, Brian, by sending one of Donald Trump's former criminal defense attorneys, Todd Blanche, now Deputy Attorney General, to the prison to see Ghislaine Maxwell, what they have the opportunity to do is mold her story in a way that doesn't incriminate Donald Trump. Because, let's get down to brass tacks. Trump put people like Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche and Emil Bove into the highest positions at the Department of Justice to be loyal to him, to take care of him, to protect him, and to do his bidding as necessary. Remember, Todd Blanche went into court every day in New York when Donald Trump was being criminally prosecuted for committing 34 felony crimes. And Todd Blanche every day looked that jury in the eye and said, Donald Trump committed no crimes. Right. That's not a criticism of Todd Blanche's decision to be a criminal defense attorney and do what defense attorneys are obligated to do, represent the interests of their client, even when their client is guilty as sin, as Donald Trump was. But that was his job. That was his mission. That was his purpose. Now, he's still loyal to Donald Trump. And he is the one, a high government official, not a DOJ lawyer or prosecutor, but a political appointee who used to be Donald Trump's defense attorney, is going to go and sit down with Ghislaine Maxwell. Do you really think, Brian, is there anybody gullible enough to believe that Todd Blanche is going to be like, listen, we need you to truthfully tell us about any information that might incriminate my boss, Donald Trump? Of course not. So here's the problem. They will get to mold whatever it is Ghislaine Maxwell says in a way that doesn't incriminate Donald Trump. And once they lock her into that account by promising her something in return, let me tell you, this is what we do as prosecutors when we sit down with somebody who's been charged with a crime, indicted for a crime, convicted for a crime, sentenced for a crime, and is looking for a benefit from the prosecutors, from the government. We sit down with them and we say, okay, what truthful information do you have about the crimes of others that we may be able to use to investigate and hold accountable other folks who have committed crimes? And Brian, if and only if somebody in Ghislaine Maxwell's position provides what we can corroborate is truthful information about the crimes of others, will we ever consider giving them a benefit for that information? But as you can imagine, people like Ghislaine Maxwell, who are serving 20-year prison terms, have every incentive to say anything that they believe the prosecutor or the person, a political appointee like Todd Blanche sitting in front of them, wants to hear. Why? Because they have the power to reduce her sentence or ask a court to reduce her sentence, and they have the power to say, we will ask the president to pardon you if you say the right things. I'm being cynical here, but come on, can you really believe that the folks who are loyal to Donald Trump are going to act in good faith as honest brokers of the facts if those facts incriminate Donald Trump? And Brian, once she's locked into whatever story she and Todd Blanche agree to in this little sit down they're going to have, then Congress can certainly subpoena her, can have her testify under oath about all things Epstein, including any Donald Trump involvement with Epstein. And she's already going to be locked in. She's going to have to stick to the script that Todd Blanche, put before her if she's going to come out unscathed and get the benefits that Donald Trump's DOJ might promise her. All of this is theoretical right now because the meeting hasn't happened yet. But let me add this. First of all, rarely do we prosecutors, Department of Justice, lawyers do business with somebody who has been convicted, sentenced, and is serving a lengthy prison term. You know why? Because we give these people every incentive to cooperate with prosecutors during the investigation before they're ever indicted. Right. Or after they've been indicted, we sit down with the defendant and their defense attorney. Mind you, we always have an FBI agent or a detective or an investigator in there with us as well, so we can accurately record every single word that is spoken. What we don't want to see happen is have somebody say, well, the prosecutors promised this person something under the table that was never documented. So there are always witnesses accurately recording every word that goes on in these kind of meetings. But the point is, usually we try to bring a cooperating witness on board before they go to trial, before they're sentenced, and before they're serving 20 years in prison. But once they are convicted and serving that sentence, rarely do prosecutors go back to them and say, now we want you to cooperate. I say rarely because sometimes we do it if we believe that that person can provide truthful information about the crimes of a significantly bigger fish. So it does happen, but it happens rarely. But this whole thing is part of the ongoing Donald Trump, Pam Bondi reality show that we can probably call the Epstein files. And the whole thing, these are all maneuvers to try to cover up and protect Donald Trump.
Well, it's worth asking here, if Pam Bondi has a story about Donald Trump, what about when the House has been able to compel the release of the Epstein files? We found out yesterday that there was a vote 8-2 in an oversight committee subcommittee compelling the release of these files to that committee. And so if Pam Bondi decides to say something in accordance with whatever new story she and Todd Blanche put together, what happens if that's directly refuted by something that the files themselves say?
Well, what will happen is, okay, so let's play this out. So the files say something about Donald Trump that Ghislaine Maxwell would have reason to know because she lived it. She is Jeffrey Epstein's convicted co-conspirator in this criminal endeavor to sex traffic young girls, right? So let's assume that she then testifies before Congress inconsistently with what Congress now has in its hands, the Epstein files from the Department of Justice. That could result in Ghislaine Maxwell being criminally indicted for perjury, more accurately, what we call a 1001 false statement to Congress. It's the equivalent of perjury, lying under oath. In theory, but who would bring that charge? Pam Bondi's Department of Justice.
Right,
really?
and by the way, even if she was charged because the DOJ wanted to save face, Trump still has the ability to offer her a pardon, which is the issue at hand with all of this right now, is that she kind of if she strikes some deal with Todd Blanche today while they're speaking from her prison cell, then she could be promised a pardon in very much the same way that if she lies and gets caught, she can also be pardoned for that.
Exactly right. Trump holds all the cards when it comes to issuing presidential pardons, even to cover up his own criminal activity. Right. Thank you, 6 Supreme Court justices who are forever apparently trying to protect a criminal president. But a couple of other things regarding Ghislaine Maxwell's potential testimony before Congress. If we go back to the scenario of, well, what if there's something in the Epstein files that is directly contradicted by what Ghislaine Maxwell testifies to before Congress? Brian, is there anybody out there who is completely confident that when the Department of Justice, Donald Trump's Department of Justice, as headed up by Pam Bondi, complies with the subpoena to give all Epstein files to Congress, do you really think they're going to give the portions of the Epstein files to Congress that might incriminate Donald Trump? I think that very unlikely. At best, it's an open proposition. And one final thing, just the fact that a political appointee like Todd Blanche, the number 2 official at the Department of Justice, the Deputy Attorney General, is going to go sit down with a convicted sex trafficker. I don't know if that has Never happened in our nation's history, but it sure wouldn't surprise me, because you know who sits down with people who have been convicted of significant crimes and are serving lengthy sentences? One person and one person only, the lead prosecutor in the case, as assisted and accompanied by FBI agents, detectives, investigators, to make sure everything is accurately captured in that meeting. And there's a reason that the lead prosecutor is the one to sit down with the person who she prosecuted, and by she, I'm talking Maureen Comey here. It's because that is the only person who can look Ghislaine Maxwell in the eye when she's saying X, Y, and Z about what Donald Trump did or didn't do. And that person, the lead prosecutor, is the one who will know, because she's privy to all of the evidence in the Epstein and Maxwell cases, whether Ghislaine Maxwell is telling the truth or whether she is lying. Todd Blanche will have no fucking idea what Ghislaine Maxwell is saying, though I'm sure he'll be satisfied to receive any information that helps clear Donald Trump. This thing stinks from the perspective of a career law enforcement agent, a career prosecutor. This whole thing stinks from start to finish, and it looks like an orchestration to try to again fool the gullible into believing that Donald Trump did nothing wrong.
Glenn, would you say that that's why the DOJ felt it was so necessary to sprint over to Ghislaine Maxwell right now? I mean, they're doing this under the guise of transparency, right? But if they really wanted transparency, if that's what truly they sought to offer, they could just release the files. Pam Bondi has the files at her disposal, and so they say that they want transparency. The proof of that would be Pam Bondi actually offering up the files that are in her possession right now. But instead, they say they want transparency, and they're going to go to Ghislaine Maxwell. Do you think that there was a reason that the DOJ sprinted over to Maxwell before Congress had the ability to do that? Because once Congress has her on record answering questions about Donald Trump, that would be the story, and it would already be documented from Congress's side. So then Todd Blanche wouldn't be able to manipulate her story in any way or get what he needs from her, which is her silence as it relates to Donald Trump.
Yeah, by all accounts, assessing the information that we have available to us, this sprint to Maxwell, as you aptly put it, is to do two things. One, to head Congress off at the pass so they can craft Ghislaine Maxwell's message so that it, does not implicate Donald Trump, and two, to continue to try to fool the gullible. Because, and I haven't even talked about this because this is perhaps the worst possible outcome, but Todd Blanche could sit down with Ghislaine Maxwell. He could then emerge from that meeting and say, everybody, not only did Ghislaine Maxwell not implicate Donald Trump, you know what she said? That Epstein's client list consists of 100 high-profile Democrats. That's what Ghislaine Maxwell told us, which, that's when I think there will be this deafening clamor for a release of all of the Epstein files. Because, Brian, let's think about this logically. If the Epstein files cleared Donald Trump and implicated a bunch of Democrats, don't you think Pam Bondi would have released it the minute she took office? Yeah. How gullible do they think we are?
Right. Glenn, let's finish off with this. Maxwell's appellate attorney is a guy named David Oscar Marcus. He was on a podcast last year with the Deputy Attorney General and former Trump criminal defense attorney, Todd Blanche. And Blanche said to Marcus, "You are by far the best out there. I now consider you a friend." And so what does having a cozy personal relationship between the Deputy Attorney General and Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney, what does that tell us about the ease with which they might be able to enter into some agreement that, if everything was above board, if these guys weren't chummy or personal friends, might not be so easy?
Yeah, it feels like a possible conflict of interest. I would need to know more about the nature of the relationship between the two attorneys. But here's the thing, Brian, whether there's an actual conflict or just an appearance of conflict that undermines the confidence that the people should have in the way DOJ lawyers are going about their business, that person shouldn't come within a mile of the case. Now, would it surprise me if these two, are thick as thieves, figuratively speaking, and that makes crafting Maxwell's story in a way that doesn't harm Donald Trump all the easier? It could very well be. But what I will also say is that, look, as a career prosecutor, I had defense attorneys that I considered to be friends, even though I would go into court and do battle with them all the time, and then we would be civil and cordial and shake hands at the end of the trial, and that didn't conflict me out of a case in which they were representing the defendant. But, it can be a close call, and when there's a close call, you don't want to be, in an adversarial relationship with somebody that you've publicly said is a good friend of yours. So, listen, that is probably the fifth reason why Todd Blanche shouldn't go anywhere near Ghislaine Maxwell. But, ethics are out the window. And I've been saying all along, and I've been watching this in real time, there is not only a brain drain from the Department of Justice with all the DOJ career people, attorneys who have been there for years, fleeing the Department of Justice rather than doing Pam Bondi, Donald Trump, and Todd Blanche's dirty work. There's also an ethics drain, not just a brain drain. The folks who take their ethical obligations to represent the interests of the American people seriously, rather than the interests of a corrupt president, are fleeing the Department of Justice because they can't work under those conditions. So, this is going to be ugly all the way around. And I, for one, will have absolutely no confidence in anything Todd Blanche says about what Ghislaine Maxwell reported at this little sit-down they're going to have.
All right, well, as soon as we have any news from this sit-down, we will, of course, bring it to you. For those who are watching right now, if you'd like to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on the screen. It's the best way to support our work, the best way to support independent media, and it is completely free. So again, links right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.